6 games in, halfway through. How do we feel about this team? How do we feel about Brian Kelly? How do we feel about the rest of the coaching staff and the rest of LSU's schedule moving forward? We'll get into that on today's edition of Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And today we are joined by Dylan Sanders of Go247. He does great work for them. A great LSU football writer. So make sure to check out his content. I also want to let you know that this episode of Locked On LSU is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And I want to thank them for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And joining Locked On LSU, Dylan Sanders, LSU aficionado. Appreciate you joining the show. And I thought it'd be good to bring you in, just kind of have a little powwow, a little kumbaya about how we're feeling, us two as a microcosm for the fan base of LSU. I want to talk about how we feel about the team as a whole, how we feel about the team itself, how we feel about Brian Kelly and the coordinators, but I'll start as, just the team itself, the X's and O's, the personnel, the players that we feel on the field, how we feel about them halfway point through the season. How do you feel so far about this LSU team compared to our expectations going into the season, what we've seen so far, the highs, the lows, just based off of the personnel? How are you feeling now that we're halfway through?
I feel like this team is exactly where everyone should have thought that they were going to be.
That's exactly what I said the other day. I was like I didn't expect them to beat Mississippi State, and I didn't expect them to lose to Florida State, but I thought, okay, 4-2 around week 6, that feels right?
Yeah, my season prediction going into the year was 7-5, and I think 7-5, it's your first positive season, fully positive season in 2 years, and I feel like 7-5, it's a good season, decent season, where you're like, all right, I like where we're at. It gives you a good point to adjust, and you probably know where you need to get better, and LSU knows where they need to get better. And yeah, so I think 4-2 right now, sitting at a point where 7-5 is very, very doable. And with this team, we've seen that they can even sneak into 8-4, and that would be awesome. But it's looking like 8-4 is like the ceiling.
Yeah.
And that's fine for year one, I think.
And that's what I talked with T-Bob and Jacob Hester at SEC Media Days going into the season. And I was like, look, I think this is a team with a very high ceiling and a very low floor. Like, it could be a 6-6 year. And they were kind of shocked at me saying that. And I was like, look, if LSU does go 6-6, that doesn't mean that they're the same team that they were in 2021 or in 2020. That just means, hey, you had a lot of cleaning up to do. You have a first-year head coach, and you have a team and a coaching staff as a whole that's just trying to figure itself out. So if you can squeak by with 6, and I think 7-5, like you said, is more realistic. I would say 6-6 is probably the floor. I would say, if you go 7-5, maybe even 8-4 in Brian Kelly's first year, is that the expectation that LSU's fan base has? No. But I also think we need to take it with a grain of salt and understand this is Brian Kelly's first year, and he had a lot to clean up. And he had a lot of, a baggage that he didn't even create himself, that he had to kind of, disperse throughout the season.
Be it that this team is 4-2, it is leaps and bounds better than the product that we've seen on the field from the past 2 seasons. And I don't think it's even close.
100%.
With worse talent, might I add, worse talent.
And that's another thing, is this team is incredibly talented, but let's not forget a lot of the pieces that were picked up from the transfer portal, not bad players by any means, but players that weren't recruited as 4 and 5 stars coming out of high school. And I also think a lot of people are down on this team because it's such a what have you done for me lately league. And what Brian Kelly has done for this fan base recently is get absolutely embarrassed by Tennessee at home. So I think that's another thing why people after week 6 are feeling so low and so frustrated, understandably so, is because we're no longer thinking about that Mississippi State game and how well LSU played. we're thinking about how poorly they played against Tennessee in Tiger Stadium.
Yeah, well, the way college football fans are ingrained is to believe two losses means your season's over. You have no hope for anything in the postseason, so you might as well pack up now. And that's not every fan, but like that's how the sport has been. Is once you get two losses, your season's over.
It's the kiss of death.
Yeah, which is another positive of college football playoff expansion, but that's for a different topic for a different show. But overall, yeah, I think LSU fans are freaking out, and it's understandable. It's what people should expect out of the fan base, but also they're fine. I don't think it's time to bite the bullet and pay $90 million to fire Brian Kelly.
No, I mean, I get it. Like even after the Florida State game, there were so many people saying, fire Brian Kelly. I was like, it's one game, people. It's one game. Was it embarrassing? Yup, it was. But I think we realized since then, Florida State's a pretty good team. But mentioning Brian Kelly, kind of taking a look at just he himself, as an independent, how should fans feel about Brian Kelly at this point? Or how do you at least feel about Brian Kelly at this point, now that we're halfway through the beginning of the season?
I am thoroughly impressed, I think, actually. Have you watched any of the LSU Gold or anything like that? They're extra special. So yeah,
I watched the specials now.
Well, I started a free trial and forgot to cancel it, and I still haven't. So I've been watching.
You're committed now.
Yeah, I'm committed.
Get your money's worth.
So I've been watching, and the way he talks to the team, I like a lot. He has really good like post in. They show his like halftime and after the game and pregame speeches, which is a really interesting insight. But I like how he talks to the team. I like how he talks about the team. And honestly, Brian Kelly has a little bit of a sense of humor that I think people have to adjust to. Because
it's dry and it's sassy.
Very, very dry sense of humor, but I enjoy it. So which is good for me, but also people learn to blow things out of proportion that he says. But it's also just him joking around, and yeah, there have been many press conference happenings this year that have blown up for no reason.
For no reason whatsoever.
But overall, like, I don't know. I feel like Brian Kelly himself has not been bad. He's made some questionable hires, which is what is going to have to, which we'll talk about in this episode also, but it's going to have to change, and he'll have to go about how he does things differently. But there are also things that he like seems to want to force. Like everyone knows he loves tight ends, but Mason Taylor for the first 5 weeks did nothing, and it wasn't working, and it was constant drops. But they still kept trying to run the offense through him. And it's like, they don't have any tight ends. Stop trying to run the offense through tight ends.
And that's like kind of how I felt. And I with Brian Kelly, I would look at it like, I like what I've seen so far, but I still have a whole lot of questions. And that's okay, because 6 weeks is a minuscule sample size. You should still have questions through 6 weeks.
Yes.
And the tight ends is one thing that I've touched on the podcast the past couple of days. Is going into the season, I was like, I'm really excited to see what Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly do with the tight ends when they start to get a lot of tight end talent on their roster. And that's no disrespect to Mason Taylor or Cole Taylor. It's just that there are several, 4 or 5 star tight end recruits that I'm thinking, oh, yay. In the future, when you get a little bit more stacked tight end room, then Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly can kind of flex that tight end muscle that they have so well at Notre Dame. And then I was like, wait, no, wait, you're doing that now? You're doing that now with, with Dre Jenkins and Malik Neighbors and Kayshon Boutte and Jack Bash on this team. You're throwing to Cole Taylor and Mason Taylor, and you're not taking advantage of this wide receiver group. So I think that's one thing that I was looking forward to seeing from them, but just not right now. Just don't try and make the personnel fit into something that doesn't. And I think also just several coaching decisions throughout the season. I think that he needs to learn this team a little bit more.
Yes, for sure.
I felt like in that Tennessee game, he didn't have a firm grasp on the team and its strengths and the game itself. Like he went into it with a certain game plan that just wasn't working, and he wasn't willing to go away from it.
Yeah, and that's something that'll come with time.
Yeah.
Because this is not his team. This is a patched together, put together with glue. This is not his team at all. We'll see over the next 2 to 3 years, which, it's a long time to ask somebody to wait, but he has to get his guys in there. He has to build the team to his vision. And yeah, you mentioned not using the personnel correctly, and that's been something that has plagued the offense. But then you look at the defense, and it's been a strength of being able to use their pieces
Yeah,
to their
absolutely.
strengths.
Barring,
But
other than benching Harold Perkins against Tennessee. But yeah, you're
yeah,
right. The defense has absolutely been a strength.
yeah, but yeah. So overall, I think it's too early to put a. I'll give a mid-season report card grade of a B to Brian Kelly.
I
B
was
for
thinking
Brian.
B, B plus. Yeah, there you go.
B for
B for
Brian.
BK. Yeah, I think it's, you have to understand what he came in with. And I don't think a lot of fans want to acknowledge that. And that's fine. As a fan, you want to be pleased. You don't want to think about how far this team really does have to go. But if you take a step back and you realize just how little this team had to work with, how little Brian Kelly had to work with, I think at this point you have to be pleased, seeing as though they're still 2-1 in the SEC. Yes, things only get more difficult moving forward, but so far so good.
Yeah.
But coming up next, I want to get into how the team can improve on offense, defense, and special teams in all three phases, the coordinators, and the quarterback. I want to get into that coming up next. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. I like to bet on games, and I will tell you that I don't like to place very high stakes wagers, and you probably don't either, especially when it comes to your business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. So that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the right people for your team faster, and it's free. That's the best part. So I work for a radio station, and one of our producers quit on kind of short notice. So we were scrambling trying to find someone. We were already understaffed and everyone was stretched thin. So we needed to find somebody to fill that job fast, and we wanted to do it for free. And we also didn't want to take time to filter through all of the candidates and look through people who probably didn't have the experience that we are looking for. But luckily, we turned to LinkedIn Jobs to help us. So all you have to do is go to LinkedIn Jobs and create a free job post, and then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. So when my company used LinkedIn Jobs, it was easy because they already kicked out all of the candidates that didn't really have exactly what they were looking for. But we were able to get on a silver platter right in front of us a bunch of candidates that were qualified and could have filled the role. So we're in October, we're in quarter 4, we're nearing the end of the year. You want to end the year strong with your business. And if you find the right team member, they can help you finish the year strong. They can help you hit those quarter 4 goals. And it's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Dylan Sanders joins the show. We kind of hinted at it a little bit in last segment, but the coordinators and some of Brian Kelly's guys and the hires that he brought in. We're going to look at the coordinators, and we can look at them as a whole or individually, because I think it's more fair to look at it individually. Your thoughts on where the coordinators have been and what they've been able to do with this roster so far.
Well,
there's an obvious one in there.
There's an obvious one. So I'll start with the good. Matt House.
Yes.
Incredible hire. Incredible hire.
Love what he's been able to do.
Yeah.
He's creative.
He's super creative. He mixes his Kentucky defense with the Steve Spagnuolo defense that he learned in Kansas City, and it creates this really fun, you never really kind of know what you're going to get. And it's a really good defense outside of a couple of big plays, which they themselves owned up to not really knowing what is going to happen against Auburn. And then Tennessee is just, I don't know how you ask anybody to stop Tennessee without any help from the other two phases. I am thoroughly impressed. I'll give Matt House an A+ for Matt House, because he's really impressed me. And should LSU be able to keep him, because I feel like he's going to be another name in a year or two that's going to be really, really high up there. But LSU's known that they're willing to pay. I think Matt House is fine.
I'm good with
We'll
Matt
just give it, yeah,
House.
Coach Matt House.
I mean, you can dissect the Tennessee game, giving up 250 rushing yards to a Tennessee team that's really not an elite rushing team. I think that was more so game plan overall, more than it was
Mm-hmm.
Matt House execution. So, looking at the Tennessee game, looking at that as, a fail from
Yeah.
LSU. If you look at the season as a whole, Matt House and this defense has been the clearest bright spot.
Yes. Moving on to the worst, I'll say. I mean,
Yeah,
it's Brian. Like
it's
it's
Brian
Brian
Polian.
Polian. It's Brian Polian.
Which is
It's a
shocking to me that
yeah.
that was Brian Kelly's one guy that he brought from Notre Dame. That was his go-to guy, his right-hand man, his bestie pop. Like that was his guy. And he is so obviously the weakest link on this coaching staff.
Yeah, and I'll give him credit. Brian Polian, great guy. Brian Polian, great recruiter.
Guy. Great recruiter.
Shift his role. It's obvious you're best friends or you're close friends. I also have an issue with hiring your friends and hiring your sons, like we've seen in Iowa. But yeah,
See how that has gone for Iowa.
yes, yeah. Hiring your friends is a risky business, but keep Brian Polian around, keep him on staff. I don't see at this point how you justify another season of Brian Polian as your special teams coordinator, because even with like the credit of, oh, these are their guys or whatever, it's bad. It's like it's like beyond bad. It's like it's atrocious.
It's like
How
they're making mistakes that high school players don't make.
yeah, it's just like if you see that your gunner's not getting down the field, switch them out. I don't care like who it is. Play starters. Like get someone at this point, because even if it's not having your kick blocked, which hasn't been an issue actually, give them credit for that adjustment. It's fumbling kickoffs, which is like a pure preparation kind of thing. It's giving up 1,000,000 yards in punt coverage per game, which is unacceptable. Like you have a really good punter, and Brian Kelly mentioned that they're out kicking their coverage. Get different coverage. Change up your coverage. At some point, it's I don't know. It's none of the pieces fit together, and it's really frustrating to watch. And it is legitimately losing them games. As soon as Tennessee got off to a free 10-0 start, you knew that game was over.
The game was over. Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like you know that nope, you can't come back from this.
And if you hand Tennessee 58 yards in a punt return, they're going to be able to turn that into some sort of points. And they did. And that's the thing is I would love to see Brian Polian in exclusively like a manager kind of role, head of recruiting. He's the one going to, the senior in high school running back's house to meet his parents. He's the one that's managing NIL deals. He's kind of like the business figurehead, and you got to bring someone else in to do the special teams, because I've said it on this podcast before. I mean, name every single possible mistake that could be made in the history of football on special teams. And LSU's probably committed that mistake in one of these 6
multiple
games.
times.
Multiple times too. And it's frustrating to see how I never even thought of special teams as being a factor in the past, because it never was, because they always just did what they were supposed to do on special teams. That's what most college football programs, especially in this league, in the SEC, they just do the right things on special teams. And LSU has been so clearly bad, like awful, atrocious on special teams.
The only time you ever want to talk about special teams is a really good punt or a really good field goal kick. And that's it. That's it.
If I never have to talk about special teams again, I will be one happy lady.
Yeah, it's the least talked about, not because it's the easiest, but it's just the most like straightforward. Like just go do your job.
Just catch the punt.
Yeah, like catch the punt. It's
stop the punt returner. Yeah.
If consistently your first person to the punt returner is your long snapper, you have an issue. And shout out to Slade Roy, because he's a baller and he deserves some respect while we're talking about specialty.
The butt kiss award this year. And then I think in terms of Mike Denbrock, it's really easy to look at Matt House and say, good job. It's really easy to look at Brian Polian and say, bad job. With Mike Denbrock, I question, is this a personnel issue? Is this a Jaden Daniels issue? Or is this a Mike Denbrock play calling issue on offense? I mean, something's got to give with LSU's offense. Something's got to improve, especially getting into this really difficult stretch. But I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if it's Mike Denbrock. I don't know if it's Jaden Daniels. I don't know if it's several drops from this wide receiver core. I just don't know how this offense can improve because I don't know what the problem is.
Well, to the question of what is the problem, I would have to say yes. Like
All of the above.
it's all of the above. It's a little bit of it's a mixture of something going wrong in every little aspect that then turns around and just looks very bad. I think it's a poor use of talent. I think it's a poor execution. I think it's poor concentration on the wide receivers' parts. As we've seen, a lot of these are just concentration drops and frustration drops. And Jaden has not been perfect, but he is who you have this year. He is your best chance to win this year. And I think they just have to do a better job of using him correctly. And I think, all things considered, Tennessee was his best game as an LSU Tiger.
He has not thrown for 300 yards since his freshman season.
Yeah.
I think that got buried amongst all of the bad, but I have to give him credit. You could also look at it and say, well, LSU was down the entire game, so of course he had to throw the ball. But I will take the little victories as they come.
Yes.
It's good to see him throwing the ball.
I think this was Daniels' best game. Now there were everything that felt like could go against LSU this game really felt like it did, whether it was poor spots, questionable penalties, bad drops in key moments. Like there was a lot. LSU realistically could have been in this game, but it was a bunch of little mistakes and big mistakes from special teams.
And if you think about it, like LSU handed Tennessee 10 points on special teams, and I believe Tennessee was able to score 13 off of Brian Kelly's failed 3 fourth down conversions. That's 23 points right there. Yeah. If you take those 23 points away from Tennessee, that's a very close game.
If I go back to most of the key moments of failure of the offense, it all seemed to be questionable play calling in like shotgun in both third and 1 and fourth and 1 at midfield, and then deciding to go for it after you lost yards, and it made no sense at all.
When you're in your own territory, and if Tennessee's at the LSU 46, Hendon Hooker's going to throw a 45-yard touchdown pass.
It really seems to have been a failure on all accounts. Mike Denbrock, I can't say his name or whatever. Mike Denbrock Mikey D deserves to have a similar microscope on him that Brian Polian does. Brian Polian's is just more obvious. But Denbrock also, I don't think, has had the best start to his LSU career. And but I mean, Brian Kelly, listen, this is what I was talking about. Whenever it's a problem hiding your friends, Brian Kelly's had to take away play calling from him before. So we know that this is something like, oh, it's happened before. So could LSU's offense is also just kind of boring. And in this day and age, it seems like you need the young, innovative minds in offense to win. And Denbrock is not the most creative guy. It's not the most innovative guy. What he has works whenever he has his guys to work, but how long is that going to take? And I don't think an offensive coordinator is going to have that long, as long as Brian Kelly is going to have to put it together.
And what he was able to do with Desmond Ridder and at Cincinnati, I think that's what at least I was looking at, and probably a lot of other LSU fans were looking at, like, hey, Desmond Ridder, Jaden Daniels have a very similar skill set. They're very mobile quarterbacks, very elusive runners, so he can recreate that kind of success at LSU. But I think a factor that at least I didn't consider close enough was the fact that Cincinnati plays in a league that doesn't play defense. So, Desmond Ridder can sit back in the pocket and, look for his guy. And I would say that Desmond Ridder is probably a more talented thrower and passer than Jaden Daniels is. So maybe what we were thinking that he could recreate just isn't going to come to fruition.
It's also important to note that they had like 4 years together before Desmond Ridder became Desmond Ridder.
Yes.
So it's I don't know. It is a similar skill set. And if you look at the guys that LSU has recruited, and while we're talking about it, we're talking about mid-season performance, recruiting gets an A. Recruiting's been awesome.
A+.
Recruiting's been awesome. And I think that there are a couple names that they're going to drop soon. That's going to be pretty awesome. And LSU is heavily in the mix for a bunch of quarterbacks. And if you look at the quarterbacks that they're looking at the most, your Ricky Collinses, who has been incredible this year, DJ Lagway, they fit the mold of the offense that it seems like they want to run. So maybe they are going to double down and just wait to get their guys in. But yeah, it's right now I have little faith in the Mike Denbrock system. Just from a blueprint standpoint.
And I do wonder, because when Brian Kelly said this at his press conference on Monday, I immediately looked up and I was like, what? Walker Howard. He said, we have a really good feeling about him. And he had this little, shit grin on his face. I do wonder if they're looking at Walker Howard to take over the job next year and to be their guy and to start, instilling this offense that they really do want to run and to get the personnel in to fit the scheme that they want to run. And if Walker Howard is that guy, and then like you mentioned, you have the Ricky Collins that can come in behind him and back him up once he gets a little bit more experience.
Well, from what I've seen of Walker Howard in like camp and stuff, well, he's going to be good. He's going to be really good. And I think that they were right to not play him this year.
Oh, I have no desire to see. Well, I have a desire, but I have no need to see Walker Howard on the field this season.
I feel like they made the right decision. This is not the best way to set him up for success. Walker Howard is legit. I think that he will win the job over Nuss, and it's just a matter of when Nuss will transfer at this point. I feel like, unfortunately, because everyone wants the fun, but I just don't see it fitting in the timeline of LSU.
And I think that everyone wants to see Nuss if they're unhappy with what they've seen from Jaden Daniels. And really, I think that Jaden Daniels is an easy person to blame about the offensive woes, I guess, if you want to call it that. Even though I don't really think it's entirely on him. I do think it's a product of the scheme as well. I think a lot of people want to see Garrett Nussmeier, but I don't think that that's the answer. I don't think that that's going to, just switching the quarterback isn't going to make you feel better. Garrett Nussmeier is not the kind of quarterback that can escape the pressure that Jaden Daniels can. When he's turning the ball over left and right, you're going to be asking back for Jaden Daniels.
Well, everyone knows the most popular player on a football team is the backup quarterback, because the grass is always greener on the other side. And as someone who has seen the other side up close and personal in practice a bunch, and we even saw it, we've seen him in 2 games so far, the grass is definitely not greener on the other side, at least for now. And Nuss does have all the tools. He has all the tools, and the idea of Nuss is really, really cool, but he is still super young and not ready at this point. And you're right. He really cannot escape the pressure that Jaden Daniels has had.
Coming up next, got 6 games left on the schedule. What should our expectations be, and what are our expectations for the rest of the season? We'll get into that with Dylan coming up next. So if you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. Take it from me. They're my favorite flavor, and it's a brand new flavor. It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate, 100% chocolate, just like all Built Bars are. They've done it again. They are so delicious. Let me introduce you to your new favorite and my personal favorite, the cookie dough chunk puffs. They've got a light, chewy texture. There's real cookie dough chunks in there. That's my favorite bite of the cookie dough bar. You get a real chunk of cookie dough in there. Ooh, it is so, so, so good. Of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And the best part of it is that you don't have to make the cookie dough. You can enjoy the bar, but it's also healthy for you. There's only 160 calories in the cookie dough chunk puffs, and they've got 15 grams of protein. They'll keep you full all day long. So run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It's the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself. That's what I would do if I were you. The cookie dough chunk puffs, just like all Built bars, are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're healthy, they're tasty, they're delicious, light, fluffy texture. They are so delicious. And they're made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently. There's a ton of health benefits. It's good for your hair, your skin, your nails. So do something good for your body, but also enjoy it. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. If you need a snack after your workout, a breakfast, or just a snack on the go, you can throw it in your bag, throw it in your purse, and you can head out the door and you'll be covered for the day. Built is the perfect protein bar. They taste better than a candy bar, but you can ditch the calories, fat, and sugar with a Built bar. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15, LOCKEDON15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKEDON15. All right, 6 games left on the schedule. Florida coming up this week. Ole Miss the following week. And I mean, it's just murderer's row, other than UAB, at the end of the season. What are your expectations for the rest of the season?
Of course, LSU is going to go 6-0, and they're going
to go Tigers.
I think that they should win this week. I think that they should beat Florida. Not only because Florida is kind of like in the exact same situation as LSU is in.
They're very similar teams.
Very similar. And I really, honestly, personally, selfishly, I don't want to deal with Billy Napier beating Brian Kelly in year 1. I really just don't want to deal with it. So I need them to take care of that.
I don't need the narrative of if Billy Napier beats Brian Kelly in year 1, then LSU made a mistake by not hiring Billy Napier. I don't think that's a fair narrative at all, but I know it's going to be one.
Yep. And surprisingly, with how much they're talked about in every aspect, Jaden Daniels has been better than Anthony Richardson this season, actually, which is kind of crazy to think about because of Anthony Richardson getting number 1 overall hype going into the season.
And I think Anthony Richardson, his highs are higher than Jaden Daniels, but his lows are way lower.
It's kind of like I was talking with Nuss, the threat, and I mentioned this today for 24/7, the threat of Anthony Richardson is always greater than the actual what result that you get. But the big thing that worries me is he's big and fast, and LSU has always had issues getting guys down that are smaller than Anthony Richardson. So maybe that could be an issue. But outside of this game, they're going to lose to Ole Miss and Alabama. And I think that's fine. That's fine. But outside of Ole Miss and Alabama, the last 3 games are all very winnable.
A&M, very winnable.
A&M, worse offense than LSU, which is crazy to think.
Jimbo, hot seat.
And Sam Pittman, the yearly frauds that are Arkansas.
What a fall from grace for Arkansas. I didn't think that Arkansas really deserved the amount of hype that they were getting going into the season, talking about like, could they potentially beat Alabama in the West? I was like, miss me with that. But I also didn't expect it to be this bad. And I know that they've dealt with some injuries, and I know that the oink doink really hurt them, and we would be looking at them way differently if they did win that A&M game. But a little bit of a fall from grace for the Hogs.
They're in a bad spot. Yeah. I will say I think 3-3 is very fair, and that would put us at 7-5. I think 3-3 is what you should expect for these last 6 weeks. It's just going to look rough because you have Ole Miss and Alabama back to back, but both of those are at home. Both of the Ole Miss is going to be at 2:30. We found out. Alabama probably going to be at night, if I had to guess.
Probably so.
So yeah, like I don't know, 3-3 is very, very, very doable.
And I also wouldn't be surprised. You know, I think that 3-3 is doable, and I would feel good putting money on that right now. But what I wouldn't be surprised about is the teams that they beat and the teams that they don't might surprise you a little bit. Like I honestly wouldn't be shocked if LSU goes into the swamp and loses and then beats Ole Miss and knocks them out of the top 10. Because I'm not incredibly thrilled with what I have seen from Ole Miss, narrowly beating a Kentucky team with an injured Will Levis. They've been able to squeak by, and it's been kind of an unimpressive 6-0. So I want to see more, a better opponents against Ole Miss. But I would not be surprised if LSU, beats Ole Miss and then loses to Arkansas or Florida or a team that they really
beats Alabama.
Beats Alabama and loses to UAB. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, anything is on the table with this team because I think Anthony Richardson is the kind of quarterback that you don't know what you're going to get when he walks out on the field. I would not to that extent, but I also think that LSU is one of those teams that I look at and I'm like, who are we getting today?
Yeah.
Is Jaden Daniels going to throw for 300 yards? Is this team not going to score a single point in the first 3 quarters? What are we getting?
At this point, it's what are we going to get in the second half? Because I feel like in the first half, we kind of know at this point that this team.
I've gotten to the point where I don't sweat in the first half anymore. I just, you're down 24-2, 2-3. Great, that's fine.
Yeah,
win.
Easy work.
Well, Dylan, I appreciate you. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Dilly Sanders, and then I write pretty much every day for 24/7 Sports at Go 24/7, and we're doing a bunch more recruiting stuff right now, and it's exciting stuff. So
He does great
come
work for
check us
247
out.
Sports. All right, Dylan, appreciate you. Thank you for coming by. We'll chat with you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. You can find us on your preferred podcast platform, but we're also on YouTube as well. So just search Locked On LSU in the search bar and hit that subscribe button, and you'll get notified as soon as Locked On LSU drops. But coming up on tomorrow's episode, the 3 ways that LSU could lose to Florida and the 3 ways that LSU could snag a win in the Swamp. We'll get into that coming up tomorrow, but you can get more on the SEC by making Locked On SEC your second listen. Everyday host Chris Gordy and the local experts of Locked On take you across the SEC in 30 minutes. Make Locked On SEC your second listen.